Everything is fine. You've died, but you're a good person, and so you're in the good place. Is what some of the characters of this TV show will have heard when they passed over, and I hope some of you will when that time comes, if that's the kind of thing that you believe in. But this was a great TV series, and I came to it very late in proceedings. I basically finished all 4 seasons about 2 weeks after the finale actually aired. But this series stars Ted Danson, Kristen Bell, William Jackson Harper, Darcy Carden, Manny Jacinto, and Jamila Jamil, amongst a whole host of secondary and tertiary characters, some of which have come from the Parks and Rec side of things, which, there is clearly heritage there, and, various other things. There's some that I'd never seen in anything before, and I'm just like, wow, I like these people. And it just gave me a wonderful insight to a bunch of actors that I wouldn't have seen in anything else. Weirdly, I'd seen The Good Mythical Morning with Jamila Jamil before watching any of The Good Place. So I didn't realise how much she kind of is like a softer version of Tahani. The pronunciation is all hers. And the bearing, she does carry herself quite well, but I don't think any of the hang-ups about her sister, etc. But this was one of those series that, you go through the first year and you suddenly hit with that sort of twist of like, it's actually the bad place, this is all a test, and Ted Danson does evil cackling so well. It was a joy to see. And, you're hit with that, and I'm like, okay. I was okay with it. I was enjoying it. It was interesting to me. Now you've hooked me. And that first season was fairly straight-laced. We got, obviously, the introduction of Ellen learning ethics from Chidi, and these various sort of other ideas, that was the seeds were planted for what would come later. The idea that John Yu, the monk, is actually Jason Mendoza, Florida native, and apparently has a brain as smooth as an egg, which explains everything. We have this wonderful cast of characters who were, in fact, the only real 4 people. So this basically gave us a year of lives and then said, well, you're going to have to come back for more of what's going on. And then over time, the plot got more convoluted. There were more, sort of roadblocks put in their way. There was the whole thing of, Michael hiding the fact that he'd done 802 reboots to try and get what he wanted out of this torture. He wanted this to work so well, but he couldn't make it happen. And something happened in him. And this is really where the series started to turn from, it's a fun comedy, it's silly in the right amounts. Amy doesn't like things that are just outright silly. If there is no character development, if there's no emotional core, if there's nothing more than just, isn't this a bunch of silly stuff whacked together, she's not going to want to carry on with that series. I mean, I think like one-off stuff is fine, but if there isn't anything else really pulling it through, it just won't grab her. And this really did. She said it's the right amount of silly, and I do agree with that. But like I said with horror, you can earn a lot with comedy. And this earns the turn, as it were. When Michael starts to soften, he starts to think more human, he starts to, dare I say, evolve past just a simple demon whose only pleasure is torture and pain and misery. And I guess we see elements of this in other demons like Glenn. He's the most gentle demon I think we've ever seen. He's just so nice and affable, and this is why everyone picks on him, because he's not a typical demon. So this is, a reason that this can happen. This is sort of setting up the idea that demons don't have to just be pure evil. And like I say, Michael's turn was really the start of the Good Place getting good. Whilst I enjoyed everything that came before and we needed that setup, that was when it started throwing us the heavier material. Half of its run was set up to me to get us to a place where we could have the second half, the last 2 years, of some of the best emotional comedy, some of the best character development, some of the best ending material that I've seen for a long time. When they go to Earth and still end up reconnecting because Michael cares enough to give him a gentle nudge. All of this was so much better than what had come before, but we needed what had come before. This is the thought that I had racing around my head during the whole time of watching it. If we hadn't have had the setup, we couldn't have earned what followed. If we'd have started with this demon who's reformed, trying to help these people get to the good place, we wouldn't have connected as well. We needed to see the worst of Michael. We needed to see the worst of Eleanor, the worst of Chidi, the worst of Tahani, and Jason trying to pretend he's Jan Yu, the silent Buddhist monk. We needed to see all of this so that when these relationships formed, I mean, we have an all-knowing being in Janet, because not a girl, not a robot. So being, I think, is the one thing she'd agree with, who, after every reboot, gets more and more sophisticated. And she ends up becoming practically human, but not quite. But she has a thing with Jason. She falls in love with him after a reboot because he's the first thing she sees, and she has to get back up to speed. And that stays with her throughout her reboots. This is interesting, because it shows that her reboots are indeed, evolutionary. They do sort of build on each other. And that was fascinating, because we're watching two beings who are not human at all become more human and want to help humanity because of it. I know ethics obviously is a big part of the show. It is what Eleanor's learning from Chidi, but we do, in the latter 2 years, really delve into some greater philosophy of, what's right. And I guess it is still moral philosophy for the most part, but there's some very deep questions here of what it means to be human, what it means to truly care for others. Does that guarantee you some kind of reward? Well, apparently not, because as we learn over time, the system is flawed, and even supposedly purely good people like Doug Fawcett himself would still not be getting in. And this is really where the last sort of turn comes. Overhaul the system is the way forward. And of course the judge agrees, so the best way is reboot entirely, because humans are just so broken, everything's so complicated in life, let's reboot it all. And they then have to fight that and figure out a new system whereby they basically invent purgatory. An idea of a test that you go through to decide whether you earn that sort of escalation or if you're just too far gone beyond saving. They develop that compromise. It's like you will go through the system until you get it right. If you're within a threshold. If you're below that threshold, bad place no matter what. If you're above that threshold, obviously good place no matter what. But even then, once we've figured out a great system that means that it's entirely fair and everyone signs off on, we then find that the good place is broken. Everyone's too happy, everyone's too chill, everyone's got too much time to do everything that they want to do, and they can. They just go, I want to do this, walk through a green door, it happens. There's a Shakespeare quote that I'm going to completely butcher, but it basically says, if all time is leisure, that's just as bad as if all time were work. We need the good and the bad. We need the toil for the downtime. And in this good place, there is no counter. And even great thinkers of the past, Hypatia, for example, or Patty to her friends, their brains are turning to mush because they don't have to worry about anything. So then they realise that the solution is to put an end point to this. Have the ability to just walk off through an archway. And this led to, the finale, of course. And I'm not going to lie, I cried. I was very emotional throughout. Both with, Janet and Jason, which obviously got paid off differently later on. But the one that really got me, and I'm sure it's not going to be a surprise to anyone who knows I'm an emotional bench, is the Chidi and Eleanor. I was like, I turned to Amy and said, even after the Jason and Janet thing, before I knew how that was going to play out, if this is what's going to happen, if we're going to have goodbyes to all of them, I'm not going to survive this. You can ask her. Those are the words I used. I will not survive this. I was emotionally fraught. I mean, the Tahani thing was like a little oasis of calm for me. I was like, okay, that's cool. She's an architect. She's not gone. She's progressed to a different idea, opening the way for others to do the same. If they've had their fill of the afterlife, but they don't want to walk through the arch and return to the universe, there's option B. Or C, I suppose. But then, like I say, we had the Eleanor Chidi moment, and that got me, because that was an earned relationship. We'd seen them completely mismatched, pretending to be soulmates because that's what the system said, but knowing that that isn't the case at all. The moral quandaries that plague Chidi, to now this place of calm that he has. No stomach aches, no decision making. Well, decision making, but not struggling over decision making. And like I say, it just got me. Him going, I need to go. I can't stay here. And, we see him walk off, and I was tears streaming down my face, and then Jason pops out. It's like, we find out that he was looking for the necklace all along, and he gives it to Janet and then follows Chidi through. And at first I felt cheated. I really did. I'm just going to real talk for a second. I felt cheated because I was like, emotional moment, and silly. No. But then I realised that actually that was kind of a balm. I needed to have that moment. I was allowed to dwell just a moment in the sadness. But this is the good place. This is his reward. It's not sad. It's hopeful. He's gone to do whatever he wants in the afterlife, and he knows that that's it. As they term it, a quietness in his soul, a peace, very calm, eternal feeling inside that's just like, okay, I can go now. As much as, he doesn't want to leave Eleanor, but he doesn't want to stay and just be bored. And, there is the whole thing before where they are deciding that, and again, that got me. Eleanor's selfishness came through again, but she went, no, I can't do this. I'm better than this. If you want to go, you've got to go. And like I say, we got that, send-off, and then we got Eleanor's send-off after Michael had been granted life. The one thing that he wanted, because he'd done everything. He'd gone from a demon to kind of middle ground to main guy running the good place. So what more is there for him? He's done everything. The only thing he hasn't done is lived. And they give him that. And I find that beautiful. The idea that humanity, flawed and broken and stupid as we are, as selfish as we can be, as awful as we can be, the greatest gift to give an immortal being is to live as a human. And we see Eleanor walk through, and I was unsure about this, and I did speak with Amy about it, and I think Amy believes that all the little orbs are fragments of an individual, but I think they're individuals themselves, because we learn of so many people passing through. It's not just our four. There are people in between. We see how many Berenies we go through. So I think everyone gets to be a conscience at a time when someone needs it. Kind of a guiding thought. For example, the guy, originally going to chuck the post away. The mail for people in the States. Originally going to throw that away, but then we see the glow. Now, that could be Eleanor, it could be anyone. It's almost like they know that someone is having a moral quandary or a poor decision, and they want to guide them through it and just go, look, here's the great call to do. Do this. This is the better solution. But I don't think they're permanently a part of that person, because then it messes up when they go to the good place. They've got two souls living in them. So maybe they do float around and become a conscience when it's needed. Kind of a bit Blue Fairy / Jiminy Cricket with Pinocchio. And I like that idea, and the fact that, it does give us that return to Michael at the end. But like I say, we couldn't have had any of that ending without earning it first. And testament to the writing that all of these thoughts were there. I've seen theories that, The Good Place is actually a series about making a TV series. Certain things like they've written themselves into a corner. Oh, look, surprise. And maybe that's how it started. I don't disbelieve that theory for at least how it started. But for how it ended, this was a great moral and ethical and philosophical look at what happens after you die. What is that end? Is it all good? Is it all bad? Is there a middle ground? You know, what can happen here? How can our actions in life justify what happens to us after that? And I like the fact that they I suppose they kind of use a Buddhist system, which is whereby everything you do in life is graded. It's not necessarily assigned points specifically, but in the cosmic scales, everything you do is graded. And unless you follow the Buddhist faith, you don't even know of this, necessarily. And that's anything that you've done throughout your entire life. Even before I would consider you morally responsible, which is why one of the issues I have with Buddhism. But they do kind of have this idea that, like, Nirvana's not everything it's cracked up to be. So then they bring in almost like reincarnation of sorts, but not full reincarnation. You are there, like I say, to guide others. So I do think, there's a lot of thought gone into that, and I don't think that fits into the TV show, metaphor. But I've gone on quite a while about this because it's a show that I started out liking, I ended up loving, and I felt every heartbreak in that finale, and I'm happy with that. Whatever happens after life, whatever you believe, is your belief. But if this is what it's actually like, I can't wait to get to the good place. Although that might be presumptuous. But that's enough from me for this week. So next week we'll be getting dark again, probably, knowing me. But until then, as always, thank you for watching and take care. And of course, be very, very good.